The table was set for 3. The casserole still warm, the cranberry pie untouched, just like the seat across from me. I tightened the edge of the napkin I'd folded into a soft triangle and adjusted the fork by 1/2 inch. Not because it needed it, but because it gave my hands something to do. The candle sat in the middle of the table, wick still white, its wax pristine. I had meant to light it. I just couldn't bring myself to. The house smelled of rosemary chicken, slow-cooked apple cider, and furniture polish I hadn't used since last Christmas. I dusted every picture frame, even the old one of our summer in Acadia. He used to love that trip. I still slept on his side of the bed. Not because I missed him more on that side, but because the weight of it kept me from rolling too far toward the empty. A draft moved through the house when the clock struck 6. I checked the driveway for the 3rd time. No lights. No tires on. Gravel. I poured water into the crystal glasses anyway, set down 3 cloth napkins, and finally sat. For a minute, I thought of opening the postcard Dolores had mailed again. It was still pinned on the fridge, crooked, like it was waiting to be taken seriously. I didn't have to read it to remember the words. If it ever gets too heavy, our doors are open. Love, D. The casserole's cheese had begun to crust. Still edible, still warm. I checked the time again. 6:43. At 6:58, I heard the front door open without a knock. No call of Mom, just the scrape of boots on the welcome mat I'd crocheted the winter Travis moved out. He walked in wearing a windbreaker, no scarf, holding a phone in one hand, looking more like someone stopping by to check a meter than a son, returning home. He gave me a tight smile, nodded at the table, then said, "Sorry, traffic," and kept scrolling. Behind him came Sabrina. She didn't knock either. She swept in like smoke, fast and hard to hold. She wore one of those oversized designer coats with fake fur at the collar and a handbag that probably cost more than my car. Insurance. Her belly was prominent now, 6 months, maybe 7, but she moved like she didn't notice or didn't care. She looked around the house like she was appraising it for sale. Her eyes skipped the table and went straight to the ceiling. "Wow," she muttered. "Still got those popcorn tiles, huh?" I stood. "Welcome," I said, my voice soft but firm. "Dinner's ready." Travis dropped his phone on the entryway bench and followed her in. "Smells good," he said, barely glancing at the dishes. Sabrina's heels clicked on the hardwood. "You cooked all this." She sounded almost amused. "That's cute." I didn't respond, just gestured to the seats. We sat in silence for a few moments, the sound of utensils shifting the only conversation. Travis finally cleared his throat. "So, Sabrina and I were thinking we'd stay a bit." I didn't look up. "Just a few months," he added quickly. "Till after the baby's here." I reached for the water jug. "You have your apartment." "Yeah, but it's small and noisy, and Sabrina, well, she needs a calm place, a house, you know. Family energy." Sabrina laughed lightly. "And real meals, not takeout and cereal." "I thought this was just a dinner," I said. Travis rubbed his hands together. "Well, yeah, but it felt like the right time to talk about it." "Talk? About what?" I asked. He looked at Sabrina, who gave him a small nod. "You've got this whole house to yourself, and we've got a baby on the way. It just makes sense. Maybe you'd be more comfortable somewhere quieter, like, you know, Skyview or one of those places with nurses and classes and stuff. You always liked art." I stared at him. "You want me to leave my home?" "Not leave. Transition. Just for a while. Or, if you'd rather stay, maybe you could help out around here, just till Sabrina's back on her feet." Sabrina chuckled. "At least those homes have heating and nurses, right?" I set my fork down slowly. Travis smiled awkwardly. You'd be more comfortable there. This house is too much for you." For a long moment, no one spoke. I stared at the cranberry pie. It had taken me 2 hours to make. My hands had trembled halfway through, and I'd gripped the mixing spoon until my knuckles ached just to stop them. I thought of telling him that, but I didn't. He'd referred to it as hours earlier. The house. As if his name were etched into the beams, as if history and inheritance were the same thing. I looked down at my fork, then at the pie I had baked with care. "You've both made yourselves at home," I said softly. "Just don't expect me to serve." The morning after. By morning, my grandmother's recipe box was gone, replaced by a shiny chrome toaster Sabrina had ordered online. Overnight, I noticed it the moment I walked into the kitchen. The counter where I used to stack handwritten cards and folded dishcloths now gleamed like a showroom. The new toaster still had the protective film on its buttons, and its cord stretched across the tile like it had claimed the territory overnight. The house felt colder than usual, not from the frost outside, but from something quieter, like the walls had exhaled and decided not to take another breath. A low wind curled past the window, panes. I reached into the drawer beneath the microwave, half expecting to find my tea tins, the ones labeled by hand, Earl Grey, mint, chamomile. But they were gone too. In their place sat new tins, sleek, uniform, unopened. I opened the pantry. Rows of jars I'd arranged over decades, jams, herbs, rice sacks, and cloth bags, were now shuffled behind snack boxes and prenatal vitamins. A sack of dried beans I'd brought back from Maine 2 summers ago was lying on the floor, torn open. I bent to pick it up when Sabrina's voice floated in from the hallway. "This place smells old. Like, not charming old, just dusty." I didn't respond. She walked in behind me, belly forward, phone in hand. "Do you keep mothballs in here or something?" she added with a wrinkle of her nose. "It's cedar," I said, almost a whisper. "Well, it's not baby safe, just saying." She moved past me and reached into the cupboard above the stove. "We're going to need to repaint this whole kitchen. These colors are depressing." She pulled out a chipped ceramic mug, one I hadn't seen in years, my husband's. The handle had a crack we never fixed because he said it gave the cup character. I watched her toss it into a cardboard box labeled "Donate or Toss." "I'll take care of those," I said. She blinked at me like I'd just spoken a foreign language. "Sure, whatever works." Travis emerged from the study, earbuds in, motioning with his hand. "Can we keep it down a bit? I've got back-to-back calls this morning." He disappeared again before I could reply. I stood in the hallway for a moment, not sure what to do with myself. I could hear Sabrina humming to herself as she shifted chairs and adjusted throw pillows, like auditioning them for a real estate listing. The scent of rosemary was gone. The air smelled like plastic wrap and box tape. Behind the salt tin, I found an old photo of Dolores tucked there years ago. She had one hand on her hip and the other holding a paintbrush, her face mid-laugh. I remembered her voice. Some spaces keep you small if you let them. I hadn't understood it then. I did now. The breaking point, I took out the trash after lunch. The bag was heavier than usual. A clang echoed as I lifted it, and something inside clinked against the side of the bin. I opened it. There it was. My grandmother's recipe box, upside down, its metal edges bent. Cards peeked out at odd angles, corners smudged with flour, cinnamon, thyme. Next to it, the chipped mug. I didn't cry. I just picked them out gently, brushing off a bit of breadcrumb that had stuck to the lid. I carried them back inside, not knowing where to put them anymore. That evening, while Sabrina napped and Travis was still talking through closed doors, I slipped on my coat and stepped outside. The wind had teeth, but I didn't care. I walked 3 blocks to Harriet's diner, my feet remembering the path even if I didn't. The bell above the door jingled as I entered. Behind the counter, Cheryl looked up. "Miss Meredith," she said, smiling. "Hot cider, right?" I nodded. "Still remember?" "Of course. You and Mr. Langley always came in this time of year." I sat at the window booth. A young couple laughed over pancakes. Nearby. Outside, a boy in a red jacket chased a dog through scattered leaves. After a while, Cheryl came over and placed the mug in front of me. "Everything okay at home?" she asked gently. I wrapped my hands around the warm ceramic. Getting there. On the table, someone had left the local paper open. My eyes caught a half-page ad bordered with snowflakes. Skyview's winter art program. Rediscover what you left behind. I stared at the words for a long time. My cider cooled. When I returned home, the house was quiet. I went upstairs, opened my nightstand drawer, and pulled out a small notepad. The pen I used dragged slightly as I wrote, slow and deliberate. The phone call. When Skyview picked up, the woman on the line spoke with a calm so deep it made me want to cry. "Skyview Estate. Good evening. How may I assist you?" Her voice was honey stirred into tea, steady, warm, unhurried. I sat straighter in my chair, tucking one leg beneath the other. The snow had started a little after sunset, a quiet brushing against the windows like someone asking permission to enter. I wore my thick wool robe, the one with the loosened pocket seam. The lamp beside me flickered once, then glowed steady. It smelled faintly of cedar and orange peel in the room, leftovers from a drawer sachet I hadn't replaced in years. I hesitated before speaking. "I'd like to ask about availability," I said. "Yes, ma'am," she said, not rushing me. "Are you interested in independent living or assisted?" "Independent. A private suite, if possible. No shared dining." I heard my voice clearer than I expected. We do have availability, actually. A south-facing corner unit just became open. Fireplace, garden access, second floor for privacy. "Can I paused, looking over at the nightstand. On top of it lay the postcard. I had reread it earlier, tracing Dolores's looping signature with my thumb. Before making the call, I'd folded it carefully, pressing the creases as if it were something sacred, and tucked it into my wallet. "Could I have a brochure sent over?" I asked. "Of course," she replied. "And if you'd like, I can prepare a quote for full payment now. You'd qualify for the long-term rate." There was a silence between us, but it wasn't awkward. It felt like space had been made for something important. "Yes," I said. "Please prepare that." I gave my email, one I hadn't used much since I retired. After she confirmed the details, I whispered, "Is it possible to move in before Thanksgiving?" There was a soft click of keyboard keys on the other end. "Yes, the suite can be ready by the 22nd. "I'd like that," I said, my voice almost inaudible. She thanked me and promised to call back the next day to finalize paperwork. I hung up, placing the receiver gently onto the cradle. My hands rested in my lap, folded neatly like I'd been taught in church. For a moment, I didn't move. Then I reached under the bed and slid out an old shoebox. It creaked slightly as I opened the lid. Inside were the ledgers, my husband's financial notebooks, each page scribbled with fine ink and blocky columns. I ran a hand across the top one, remembering how he used to balance the household accounts with nothing more than a calculator and quiet confidence. I flipped to the last page, scanned the numbers, then pulled out a steno pad from the drawer. I wrote down a name I hadn't said out loud in a while. Mr. Leland. He'd been our attorney since before Travis was born. The rotary phone still sat in the hallway. I dialed slowly, counting each click. The line rang twice before his assistant picked up. I left a message. "Tell Mr. Leland Meredith Langley would like to make an appointment tomorrow if possible." I hung up just as a knock sounded on my door. "Mom?" Travis's voice, muffled through the wood. "You see my tablet? I swear I left it in the kitchen. I opened the door a crack, the hallway light spilling in. He looked tired. Pajama shirt askew. One sock missing. Try the couch cushions, I said with a small smile. Oh, right. Thanks. He turned away without another word, already scrolling through his phone. I returned to my room. The snow had thickened outside, blanketing the garden in quiet white. My rocking chair creaked as I sat, slowly shifting back and forth. Somewhere below, Sabrina laughed at the television. I let the sound pass over me like distant waves. My phone buzzed. A message from Dolores. Skyview will feel like breathing again. I didn't reply. I just smiled. I reached for the sticky notes in the drawer, wrote a single word, then pressed it gently to the center of the vanity mirror, letting it hover beside, my reflection like a truth I'd finally allowed myself to say. Departure. The legal meeting. The suitcase didn't creak when I zipped it closed. It simply whispered, "It's time." I sat on the edge of the bed for a moment after fastening the final latch, letting my hands rest lightly on the worn leather. The suitcase had traveled with me on every major chapter of my life. Our honeymoon in Oregon, the college tour with Travis, the funeral in Ohio. Now, one last journey. Not away from something, but toward myself. The sticky note still clung to the mirror. Departure, it read. I'd added a date beneath it this morning in careful inked print. Nov 22, 10 a.m. I didn't need a reminder, but I wanted one anyway, to look it in the eye. By mid-morning, I stepped onto Main Street. The sky was a low ceiling of gray, the kind that promised snow but offered only wind. Maple leaves clogged the gutters in soft piles. I walked briskly, gloved hands folded around the strap of my purse, the town's silence matching my own. Leland and Associates sat quietly between a stationery store and a shuttered barber shop. The door still had the same polished brass handles. It did in the 80s, when Arthur Leland first handled our joint trust. Inside, the carpet was new, but the air held the same mix of books, dust, and varnish. Mrs. Langley, Mr. Leland greeted me in his even tone, rising from behind his desk. His glasses had slid down slightly on his nose, and he adjusted them with practiced fingers. I've taken care of everything, just as we discussed. He slid a folder toward me. Inside were the documents, property transfer, asset consolidation, and the foundation charter, the Langley Art Grant. I ran a hand across the embossed lettering. He would have liked this, I said softly. Mr. Leland nodded. He believed in doing something quietly but meaningfully. You're honoring that. I signed where he indicated. My name, my hand, my choice. As I stood to leave, he said gently, "You're doing the right thing, Meredith." I know, I replied. But it's still strange how doing the right thing can feel like turning away from everything you once called home. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The confrontation. When I returned, the house felt colder than when I'd left. Not physically, but in the kind of way a once-loved room starts to pull away from you, no longer holding your name with tenderness. I placed the suitcase upright near the door. In the kitchen, the casserole dish from Saturday night sat clean and dry on the rack. I wrapped it in a soft towel and slid it into the cupboard. It wouldn't be used again here. Sabrina stood by the fridge, holding her phone with one hand, the other balancing a bowl of dry cereal. We're out of the prenatal vitamins, she said without looking up. Can you pick some up next time you're at the store? I stepped past her, pulled open the drawer with the pens and notepads, and retrieved a single envelope. My reply was quiet, even kind. You'll have to manage without me. She blinked, confused, as if I were speaking in code. Upstairs, I heard Travis's voice rising from the study. The house is worth more than that if she just signed the damn thing over. I walked to the staircase and paused. He didn't know. Not yet. Back in my bedroom, I placed the envelope on the desk and wrote in firm strokes, "To be opened after my departure." Inside, I had left a short note. No anger, no accusations, just facts. The deed transfer, the art grant, the termination of shared access to accounts, a reminder of choices made and choices not made for him. As the day dimmed into early evening, I returned to the dining room. I lit the same candle that had gone untouched the night of their arrival. This time, I didn't set the table. I didn't bring out a meal. I let the flame burn steady, small, and unbothered. The house around me pulsed with low voices, distant laughter from a television show I didn't recognize, and the sound of someone opening a bag of chips. But I sat quietly beside the candle, watching it hold its place in the room. Not for dinner, but for closure. And I let it burn. Sky view. The chair was soft, the tea warm, and for the first time in years, I felt like I belonged in the room I was sitting in. Sunlight spilled through the garden room's wide windows, painting the hardwood floors in golden patches. Outside, the last leaves clung to bare branches, defiant and trembling in the morning breeze. Inside Sky View, everything moved, slowly, intentionally, like no one was trying to outrun anything. I curled my fingers around a ceramic mug. Cinnamon and clove rose in the steam. In the corner, someone played a soft melody on the piano, and from down the hall came the faint echo of a choir rehearsal. There was no shouting, no expectations, just warmth. Dolores appeared beside me, wrapped in a shawl that looked hand-woven. She leaned in and whispered, "Told you it would feel like breathing again." I smiled. "You were right." She pointed her chin toward a long table in the corner, where a few residents were painting small canvases, chatting about the best pie crust ratios. "After brunch, I expect you there. They're doing orchids today." "Is it required?" I teased. "No, but I'll guilt you into it anyway." The Thanksgiving brunch was simple. Just slices of roast turkey, cranberry compote in tiny porcelain bowls, cornbread muffins warm enough to melt butter. We didn't go around the table saying what we were thankful for. No one needed to. It was in the way we passed the sugar, the way we asked about one another's grandkids or garden boxes or favorite hymns. After the meal, I strolled to the greenhouse corridor. Inside, the orchids bloomed in fragile, defiant colors, white, violet, pale yellow. I pulled a sketch pad from the tote bag Dolores had left for me on my first night. My hand moved slowly across the page. It had been years since I drew anything. The petals came out slightly crooked, but they were mine. The reckoning back at the house I'd once called home, the lights were off in the kitchen. Dishes were stacked haphazardly in the sink. A pile of unopened mail leaned against a vase someone had knocked sideways. Travis stood in the living room, holding a folder with trembling fingers. "What do you mean it's not in my name?" he snapped. Mr. Leland adjusted his coat collar. "It's been transferred to..." "Who?" "The question is irrelevant now," the lawyer replied evenly. "You're no longer listed." "That's impossible." Travis fumbled with the final page and stopped. There it was, my signature, unmistakable. Behind him, Sabrina crossed her arms, face pinched. "I'm not raising a baby in someone else's leftover life." "Do you think I planned this?" Travis shot back. "She's trying to punish me." Mr. Leland remained unmoved. "No, she simply stopped being your plan B." Travis's face crumpled into something between disbelief and shame. He dropped onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. The letter later. That evening, Skyview's hallway was dim and calm, lit only by sconces shaped like open books. I sat by the window with a second cup of tea. Outside, snow had begun to fall. Light, unhurried. Dolores walked by, tapping the bulletin board with a pen. "Next week we're making hand-tied wreaths," she said, not looking at me. "You better sign up." I raised an eyebrow. "Do I get extra points if I make 2? She smirked and disappeared into her room. When I returned to my suite, something pale lay just inside the door. A folded sheet of paper. No envelope. No name. I bent down, picked it up with care. The handwriting was uneven, pressed, uncertain. I was wrong. The handwriting was familiar, but shaky, like someone trying to spell out an apology with broken fingers. I held the envelope gently, its paper soft from having been carried too long in someone's coat pocket. No name on the outside, just my suite number written in uneven, blue ink. The snow had begun early that morning. Soft flurries drifting across the sky view windows like dancers with no music. I stood by the orchid planter, one bloom fully open, the others still curled in their green fists. I didn't open the letter right away. I set it on my desk, made a pot of chamomile, and waited until the tea bag had gone cold. When I did open it, I recognized the voice before the signature. "Mom, I don't know if you'll read this or if you'll keep it. I'm not asking for anything. I just needed to write it." He wrote of late shifts at a supply warehouse, his hands blistered from lifting crates, his breath visible in the early morning cold. He wrote of a tiny room with a creaky radiator, of coffee brewed in a dented percolator, of silence. I go to meetings now. They help. Sometimes I tell people I used to be the kind of son who thought love was a currency, that if someone stopped paying, it meant they stopped caring. But now I get it. You didn't stop loving me. You stopped letting me spend it recklessly. If I ever see you again, I don't want anything. Not a place to stay, not money. Just maybe you'll look at me like a man instead of someone who disappointed you. There was no signature, just a final line, a little lighter than the rest. I understand now. I folded the letter once, then again. I opened the drawer beside my bed, the one where I kept my husband's old letters, scientific scribbles from conferences, a note he once left tucked into my suitcase. "Call me when you miss me." I placed Travis's letter next to them carefully. I didn't read it twice. New beginnings. That afternoon, the Skyview Community Hall buzzed with gentle energy. The holiday decorations had gone up, hand-cut snowflakes, a paper fireplace strung with knitted stockings. Dolores arranged a table, of cider and shortbread, making jokes about how she'd spike the punch if anyone under 70 weren't around. Nora, the youngest of the Skyview art students, stood by her easel, anxiously twisting the hem of her sweater. She had soft brown curls and freckles that reminded me of someone I used to be. "I saved this one for you," she said as I approached. Her painting was a watercolor, soft blues and grays, a lone orchid in the corner, a faint outline of a window behind it. The title, handwritten in the corner, "Still Orchid." "You painted this for me?" I asked. She nodded. "You don't look like someone who left," she said quietly. "You look like someone who began again." I couldn't find the words for a moment. I simply reached out and squeezed her hand. Later, when the mini exhibition began, Dolores nudged me toward the podium. "Go on," she said. "They're waiting." I stepped forward, not as someone's wife or mother, but as Ms. Langley, artist, mentor. Just me. The faces looking back were kind, expectant. A few familiar, a few brand new. Nora stood at the front, her eyes wide. "I used to think that starting over meant going back to who I was," I said. "But it doesn't. It means becoming who you were meant to be after everything else has stripped you bare." I looked down at Nora, then back at the room. "This part, This part is mine. The applause was soft, warm enough. Later that evening, I walked to the sky view garden. The ground was cold, but not frozen. I knelt down slowly, pressing my hand into the soil until it gave just enough. I planted a single orchid, its stem fragile but rooted. Behind me, Nora appeared quietly. She didn't say anything. She just reached for my hand, held it as I stood. The air smelled of snow and pine. Somewhere, in the distance, carolers were warming up, and in the window of my room, the orchid I had sketched on Thanksgiving stood in full bloom. Not alone, just beginning. Somewhere between silence and snow, I found the quiet kind of strength that doesn't ask to be seen, but holds you steady just the same. I used to think love meant always saying yes, always giving, always staying. But I've learned, if you forget to honor yourself, even those you love most may forget to honor you too. Like an old armchair in the corner of a room. Once the center of comfort, now overlooked. Until one day someone decides to sit and finally understand what it's held up all these years. If this story touched something in you, maybe take a moment to reach out to someone who's always been there. Even in the quiet. Sometimes the warmest kind of love is the one that finally turns inward.